Maybe it's because they are the peak of physical fitness. Maybe it's because to so many of us, they portray larger-than-life characters that burst from our TV screens. Whatever the reason, a tragedy that strikes athletes just seems to hit differently. While many of these tragedies are well known, this one isn't, at least outside of Canada. This is what you don't know about the disappearance and alleged curse of Bill Barilko. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
How's she going, eh?
And today we have a story of success, tragedy, and an odd sort of maybe curse. Blake, before we get into this episode, which, to be honest, is a little bit sad. Let's not talk about sad things to get it started. Let's shift gears. I'm sure you've never been to Canada's finest export, Tim Hortons, before. Is that correct? Are there Tim Hortons in America?
That is
correct. It may not even be an export. It may just be a thing. Okay.
I think so.
So we've not been to one of those.
I think they're in Maine.
That would be, I think,
which is basically Canada.
Here, Canada's favorite fast food. What's your favorite fast food restaurant? And I promise everybody listening, this has a purse at the end of the episode, so you'll just have to stick around for that. Favorite fast food restaurant.
I would say my favorite fast food place, when I was young, it was definitely Bojangles. But you wouldn't know it if you knew me or my physical stature. I tell people that I was raised by Bojangles. But they don't believe me. So people tell me to eat a biscuit a lot, and I tell them that I have, and it didn't work, but they don't believe me. Anyway, currently, I think my favorite fast food is probably Chick-fil-A. That would be my go-to now if I had to choose. But of course, not on Sundays, right?
Nope. The Lord's chicken is available and delicious every day, except the Lord's Day, which I guess makes sense. For me, my stature reflects my love of Bojangles. So yours doesn't, but mine does. I love a supreme dinner. Of course, if you are from the parts of the country that don't have Bojangles, you should go get one. Like not go get food Bojangles, but go get an actual franchise and throw it up. Because anybody who comes to North Carolina gets introduced to Bojangles and they love it. Dwight Howard was a fan, wanted to stick around Charlotte. Thankfully, he didn't stick around.
Imagine.
But it was his favorite part of the experience. The other thing, my number 2 would be Cookout. You can't beat $5, or I guess inflation got us to like $6.
Is it? I was say, there's no way it's still 5, right? That was college stats.
I think it's $5.99 now instead of $4.99 for your A1 burger and fries and whatever, onion rings. What's your Cookout tray?
Oh, I have not had Cookout since a long time, so I could not even tell you. It used to be a burger with sometimes double fries, but those were like the late nights in college kind of thing.
But if you got a couple people eating off of it, you do the nuggets and the burger and the like corn dog. Like everybody gets.
Basically, get 3 entrees in a tray, and you could just share it
for $5. The best thing ever.
Yep.
Cookout, sponsor of the Southern 500 NASCAR race, and that's how we bring it back to sports. But we will bring the fast food back before we're done. But let's get on to our story of bashing Bill Barilko, the alliterative and fun name, bashing Bill. How's that for a nickname for this dude?
Pretty solid.
Yeah, and he was too. So he was Born in Timmins, Ontario, Canada on May 25th, 1927. Timmins, as I've learned, is a mining town that actually boomed during the Great Depression when everywhere else was falling apart. Coal was still a thing people needed, and so people flocked to the mines for a job, and the jobs were still available. So that's where his family came in. Unfortunately, speaking of his family, his father died when he was young, and we see that yet again. Some tragic thing happens in one of our profiles' lives. It almost seems like it can't be a prerequisite, right? Obviously, there's great people that don't have tragedy early in their lives, but it just seems like it's a common thread for most of our profiles that they have something like this. But his father died when he was young. It left his mother to raise 3 children by herself. And Barilko found some solace playing hockey, as many Canadians do. He has one problem with that. He, in his very young youth, had never learned how to properly skate. And
That's
so
a problem.
You may recognize skating, a prerequisite for hockey.
That is a prerequisite, yes.
You have to be able to do that. And so, because he couldn't skate yet, they did the natural thing and put him in the one position where he didn't really have to, and they threw him in the goal. He was going to be the goalie, and that's good. Like, solid. You do need skill to play goalie. It's not technically the same thing as throwing a kid in right field, but I do think in both soccer and hockey, your least athletic person might end up in goal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You end up just like getting thrown to the back there because you're not useful anywhere else at that time.
But good for Barilko. He did eventually learn how to skate, and kind of driven by the fact that he was playing gold outside in the freezing Canadian winter. So he didn't like the fact that he was just kind of standing around in the cold. That kind of encouraged him to learn how to skate and eventually move up a line and to become a defenseman rather than a goalie. He also became a local hero at the age of 11 when he was riding his bike and he witnessed a 14-year-old break through the ice. And Barilko went out and saved the child's life. So shout out to him, a literal lifesaver at this point, and tapped into one of my just unnatural fears of ice and falling through it, because, and I feel like it's like driven by, I feel it's driven by like media. You always see people playing outside and then the ice starts cracking and they fall through and it's, oh my God, what are we going to do? Yeah. So irrational.
Every show that includes ice, it involves ice starts cracking, people start scattering. And I mean, I wouldn't trust any layer of ice over any sizable body of water where we live. It just doesn't get cold enough to thicken, to freeze thick enough to where it could sustain our weight. But I mean, people snowmobile across the Great Lakes. I mean, in the wintertime, they're passable. Like you can drive to Canada on a snowmobile across the lakes. So I don't know. I've never done that. But the fake ice down here is fine because it's probably like a foot deep or so. Like the ice that they make in hockey rinks. It's probably pretty thick, and there's probably concrete beneath it. So there's little to no risk.
We went ice skating one time, and it was literally some sort of like plywood that they had put some sort of like. It wasn't like Dove soap, but it was some other thing that had coated this plank wood they had painted white, and we skated on.
Oh no!
In air quotes.
Oh no! That's the South. That's ice skating in the South.
I would trust Canadian ice though. Canadian ice is built different.
100%.
Just means more, like the SEC. So after he learned how to skate, he distinguished himself very well in juvenile hockey. One thing I learned in doing a little bit of reading for this is that juvenile hockey, not even junior hockey, but juvenile hockey, even at that time, was taken very seriously. There's like an article of one like youth team in Timmins dropped him from their roster, and another youth team in Timmins picked him up. And
Dang.
Like, why do we have a transaction page for youth hockey? I don't know, but
That's impressive.
Big business. Eventually, as he rose through the ranks, he ended up on the Hollywood Wolves of the Pacific Coast Hockey League, and that would be Hollywood, California, LA. The Wolves were like, if you think of it as the way we would think of minor league baseball, there's the major league team, there's a triple A team. The Wolves would have been kind of the double A level affiliate of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who Barilko had idolized growing up as a child in Ontario. Lucky for him, very early in his professional career, several defensemen on the Maple Leafs roster were hurt, and when he was called up to Pittsburgh, where their AAA level type team was located, he also got called up straight to Toronto. Just keep flying, kid, and come straight to the big time. Like he literally was getting called up to Pittsburgh. Plane never touched down, just rerouted to Toronto.
Just kept going.
Dropped him off there. And he immediately started to be successful in his time there. He became a full-time member of the team's defense. And he did have some accolades in the first 5 seasons of his playing career. He won 4 Stanley Cups for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He actually led the league in the one thing I guess you want your defenseman to lead the league in, which is penalty minutes. I saw one thing, and I think you may have mentioned it to me before you were recording, that somebody said that he's the kind of person who would like skate through the boards to hit you. Like if he wanted to hit you, he would. You had to keep somebody else said you had to keep your head up when you were on the ice with him, and you definitely didn't want to get him, quote, startled in any way, because he was just going to come for you. Which is his gift, right? He wasn't a talented skater early on, so I guess he learned to use his body as a weapon, which is, use what God gave you. In this case, it was toughness, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. You normally think of the child prodigies in any sport as like the youngest kids with the most skill. He didn't have that because when he started playing hockey, he wasn't a natural skater. He had to learn how to skate after he started playing hockey. And so he didn't have the natural skill of a hockey player. And so when he did get big enough, he just prided himself on playing the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, the toughest kind of person, which again, every team needs one of those people who are not afraid to go to the box, right?
As a Carolina Hurricanes fan, I agree. Every team does need that. And you can tell when they don't have it. So Barilko, that type of player, he also, obviously had some skill. He appeared in 3 NHL All-Star games. I'm sure we have hockey aficionados out there listening. Somebody's going to fact check me on this and say, when he was playing, the All-Star game was just the champions versus the All-Stars. Of course he was in it, and you are correct. However, they also named, much like an NBA first and second team, they named an all-star team that was of the entire league, first and second teams. And so Hockey Reference is using that to name him a 3-time all-star. In his first 5 seasons, he had a 5th and a 7th place finish in defensive point shares, which they were not calculating back in the 1940s. That's a new metric.
I'm surprised they were counting goals in the 40s. Man, that's tough. Who won? I don't know. We can't count.
We got 15 hits. How many you got? I don't know. So yeah, new metric, but obviously one of the most talented players on the defense. Not the best defenseman in the league. He never won an award for that, but he was near the top throughout the first 5 years of his career. Perhaps his career-defining moment came in that 5th season in the 1951 Stanley Cup Final against Montreal. The series was in Game 5 for this moment, and it was 3-1 in favor of Toronto, which sounds like a lopsided thing. It sounds like we're on our way to a gentleman's sweep. but it really wasn't. All 4 games of this series had gone to overtime. So really 50-50 games either way. Hopefully everybody's seen an overtime hockey game. It could go on just a simple mistake, a fluke bounce. Like, that's how you lose in overtime. So these are incredibly close games. And game 5 was no different. The 5th game went to overtime as well. Toronto's coach, Joe Primo, gave a pretty harsh directive to his team before overtime started. He demanded that there was to be no defensemen go into the offensive zone, so no defensemen in the Montreal zone, if Maurice Rocket Richard was on the ice for them. Richard, one of the greatest goal scorers, hockey players, whatever you want to call him, in the game's history. And so he didn't want to get beat by Richard. So he's not saying you can't pinch. He's not saying you got to stay, at the top of the zone. He's saying you can't go in the zone at all. And he tells everyone on the team, if I see you in there, it's a $500 fine. That's it. I'm
in the 50s.
In the 50s. $500 out of your check right now. Don't go. Barilko, who was as hard-nosed in his attitude as he was his hockey game, chose early in this overtime period not to listen to those directions. One of his teammates takes a shot from the right side of the ice. Barilko pinched, which means he went into the zone, way low in the zone, and the rebound just happened to come towards him. Being on the weak side, he was relatively undefended. He sprinted forward, left his feet. The pictures of this are really reminiscent. I think most people have seen like the famous Bobby Orr, like flying through the air picture. This is very similar. Like, he completely left his feet to shoot this puck. Rockets by the goaltender. One of the accounts of this said that the goalie had absolutely no shot. He wasn't sure where the puck was, and the shot was just so hard and pinpoint, it didn't matter if he did or not. Like, it was going in. And he wins the cup for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Coach Primo, to his credit, goes to Barilko after the game and tells him not to worry about the fine. You won the cup, so everything's okay. Forget all that stuff I said. You're the man. No fine.
Imagine him still taking $500 from this guy after winning a cup, after winning the 4th cup in 5 years. He's like, no, I think you're fine. I will say though that, like this, I can't imagine this directive being in hockey today, the way that the NHL plays today. Like, you cannot imagine a game in which defensemen don't go into the offensive zone all the time. Like some of them will just take it on their own. Will carry it into the zone themselves. Not just like happen to slip past the blue line. They will just take it in themselves and then throw it around the boards or whatever. So I can't imagine this. I mean, they were probably in 1951. They were probably playing a little bit of a different brand of hockey than what we're playing now. But you can't imagine that sort of a rule being set today.
Yeah, although my hot hockey take is that offsides should not be a thing. Get rid of offsides, and then you would have some defensemen. You would stretch the ice more, so that would be weird. You might have that strategy come back into play because you wouldn't want somebody leaking in right behind you, right? But back then, yeah, that strategy, like, you don't want Richard to beat you. You know he's the best player on the planet at the time. Don't let him beat you. I get that. But it feels like prevent defense in a way too, right? Like,
yeah.
Everybody stay back. We're not going to win this way, but we don't want them to win. We're going to limit their chances.
We're not going to lose. Yeah.
Right. But when you, yeah. The old joke about those things is that when you play like prevent defense, the only thing you're preventing is your chance of winning. So don't do it. But,
yeah. No, we see that in other sports because soccer does the same thing. Like you'll go up a goal and then the team will just park the bus. And because you have a forward playing like defense 30 yards from the goal that they're not good at, like you're bound to allow something. The reason you're winning is because you kept pressure up the field. not because you just sit everybody back. Now I understand like if you're like prime Liverpool from like 2, 3, 4 years ago, you're not going to send Alexander Arnold up all the way up to the corner flag, maybe, but don't like chain him to the goalpost either. So like at some point it is a negative thing because you're just like the reason you're winning is because you played a certain way. Don't change it because you're going to lose.
Right. Like whatever your style is how you should. Like, because the counter argument to all this is the Dean Smith 4 corners situation. Like, you get up in the game and then you just start passing the ball around. But that's how they played. Like, they knew that is what they were going to do. They practiced that. That was part of the system.
Right.
We get a lead. It gets to this point of the game. We're just passing the ball around and we're going to kill time. Like, if that's what you do, fine. If 98% of your practice is go down the floor as fast as you can, get the ball in, we're going to press, then don't all of a sudden trust that 2% practice time is going to win you a game.
Right.
And you want to change it up. Like, that's not. Anyway.
None of your players know what to do in that situation. Like, you can't just call that and like then they're all just standing around like, oh, what am I doing back here? I don't really know. Let's try something new for the first time in the 90th minute of a really important soccer game. Like, yeah, sounds like a great idea.
Hey, we've been in this quarterback's face all day. What we should do now is rush 3 and have everybody else stand 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage and see what happens.
Jesus. Yeah, they basically handed Tom Brady Super Bowls doing that. So, yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I think the Giants are the only ones that figured it out. The Giants are the only team that didn't do that. Like, Strahan was still just, pew!
Hey, Bill Barilko agrees with us. Sometimes you just ignore the directions.
You just have to do it. Yep.
You just go win the game yourself. After this season, Barilko is age 24 years old. He's won 4 Stanley Cups. He's played 5 years. He's a 3-time All-Star. And he's only 24. He's also got a series-clinching goal to his name, right? That's a moment. There are few Stanley Cups that are won in overtime. He's got one of them. Like, he's living on cloud 9, top of the world. At this point, he's a Toronto Maple Leafs legend, and he goes home for the summer, back to Timmins to visit some folks. And it is there towards the end of that summer that his hometown dentist, Henry Hudson. And am I the only one that cringes when people name their children after historical figures? Like, it's weird to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Henry Hudson discovered the Hudson River. Well, yeah. Discovered the Hudson River. And then we just named this. Yeah, we're going to name you Henry Hudson. No one's ever heard of that name before. There's a director.
Totally unique.
There's a director named Chris Columbus. Like, it's weird.
Yeah, no. Please don't.
Yeah, I don't. Anyway, sorry if you're named after a historical figure.
We love you all anyway.
You live up to that name, and we'll all be proud of you. But he meets Henry Hudson, or he knows Henry Hudson. Hudson invites him to go fly fishing in northern Quebec towards the end of August before he needs to go back training camp. This kind of intrigues Barilko because for all of the Canadian things he had done growing up, he had never been fly fishing before. And so he thought it was a new opportunity. It'd kind of be cool. One more kind of relaxing weekend getaway before I got to go hit the grind of a training camp in the 1950s, which wasn't the most pleasant.
It didn't exist.
Yeah. Well,
did they even have preseason stuff?
If it did, it was go skate, back and forth 55,000 times till you throw up. I mean, nothing wrong with that. And so Barilko goes to his mother and says his plans. He's staying with his mother for the summer. And his mother was immediately against this thing. And as this story goes, you're going to see why this premonition kind of matters. But I think all of us know these feelings or these premonitions when somebody's about to do something, we're about to do something, we're like, that's not a great idea. I don't really know about this. And we kind of, sometimes we listen to them, sometimes we don't, because these gut feelings usually are just like nonsense, right? Only when they come true do we think, oh, wow, I knew that was something I wasn't supposed to do. And so this is kind of one of those times. His mother was against it. She was a little bit superstitious. Her husband had died on a Friday, and so she was against doing anything that could be risky. Don't take chances on Fridays because Friday was a bad day. And so because they were going to leave on this trip on Friday, Barilko's mother was against it. He said no. There's a couple of stories that say that she was so mad that when he went to tell her bye, apparently she always made him like a lunch for the day if he was going somewhere. She always saw him out of town. She was so mad at him, she didn't do any of this stuff. She was like, don't go. I don't want you to go. And then just kind of was frustrated with him to the point that she didn't see him off. The pair, Hudson and Barilko, did make it to Rupert House on James Bay. We know that because they were seen refueling in the area Sunday before their return trip home. But that would be the last time anyone saw Hudson or Barilko. The two never made it back to Timmins, Ontario. Now, whether because of the stature of the person missing or just general Canadian hospitality, I don't know. Like I don't know enough about Canadian history or the Canadian people to know if this is like celebrity treatment or if this is just the way we would do things. But the Royal Canadian Air Force sent out a search party as soon as it was discovered these two were missing. Many of the people on this initial search were in high hopes. Hudson was an experienced pilot. He knew the area quite well. So a lot of people were just kind of thinking they've put the plane down somewhere. We're going to find them. Everything's going to be okay. They searched 78,000 square kilometers over 4 days, and they could not find any trace of them. 2 months later, after a continued search, it became the most expensive manhunt in Canadian history. It is the equivalent of $3.7 million that was spent on trying to locate Barilko and Hudson. But after 2 months, the search was just kind of called off. There were no leads. They hadn't found them. They had no idea. There was no trace. There was no evidence. All they had was the expected flight plan and the fact that people had seen them refueling, and that was it. Naturally, in that environment, conspiracies started to pop off almost immediately. One of them is one of the standard conspiracies for people that go missing. One, if you know your history, is also pretty obvious. The first is that Barilko had secretly become a gold smuggler. Apparently there's a lot of gold in northern Canada. So he was trying to pay off debts, or he was just trying to get rich, or he'd just become kind of disillusioned with society and was going to start smuggling gold. That's kind of a common missing person conspiracy, that they've got to go do this thing. They ran and hide, witness protection, that kind of thing. The other is more historically relevant. This was the height of the Cold War. This was peak Red Scare territory. And Barilko's parents, both of them, just happened to be of Russian heritage. So one of the conspiracies was that the two had defected to the Soviet Union, where Barilko was teaching the game of hockey to the youth of Russia. None of these conspiracies, by the way, really substantiated, but when you have no other evidence, no evidence to the contrary, everybody was still kind of holding out hope that there was some way they were going to find them. So, conspiracies pop up out of that situation.
Yeah, naturally that happens. And it's not like, and I can imagine that, like, obviously these conspiracies weren't negative in nature or like harmful in nature. Like, they didn't think that, they weren't trying to just lie on purpose. Like, we think about conspiracy theorists today, and it's very different. Like, this is just like I wonder where they went. No, maybe they went and did this. And there was some relevance to both of these, but you're right, it's a little weird. But I mean, yeah, you would be naturally hopeful based on the speed with which the Royal Canadian Air Force was sent out. You would just hope that they would knew what they were doing, and with an experienced pilot and all of that stuff, you would imagine, and that's it, me being in that situation, I would imagine, well, yeah, you would hold out hope because you would want the best for them. But we'll get to the rest of the story. But yeah, that's a ton of money, and I can imagine that like these types of searches today, might cost more than that just because of the cost of stuff. But I mean, that's still incredible search for two people. One, and maybe because he was famous, but we'll never know probably.
Maybe, but just good-natured folks there in Canada. All right, so we're going to pause right here in this tragic note for something a little bit more fun for just a moment before we get into the rest of the story. We're going to do a little bit of trivia here for Blake. We're going to redeem ourselves from the Patrick Waugh trivia from before. It's going to be great.
I don't want to talk about it.
As we are recording this, the Toronto Maple Leafs currently own the longest NHL Stanley Cup drought. They are the team with the biggest gap between wins. So I'm giving you that one. Your job is to find the next two. There are two teams tied right behind the Maple Leafs, where if they were to win, it would be these two teams currently, or that would then become the longest drought.
Okay. What sports are these two teams in?
So these are both NHL teams. So this is the two, because
okay.
The Maple Leafs are not actually the team with the longest championship drought in pro sports. Just in the NHL. There's actually a couple much longer than theirs, which is hard to believe because theirs is pretty old. It's 55 years, but there's some way longer than that.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot more sense. All right. Then this is Stanley Cup droughts, correct. Not like correct. Playoff droughts or anything like that. Okay. Let me think. If I ask about divisions, I don't know if I would know what divisions the teams were in, so I don't know if that's a good one. Because I don't know how. So wait, you said there's two teams right behind them. Are they tied for they tied for second place?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. Are either of the teams Canadian?
One of the teams is Canadian.
One is Canadian. Okay, let me think about that one. You have Toronto, Montreal.
There's a bunch.
And Edmonton, Vancouver. Okay, wait. I don't know when. I know the Oilers won in the last 40 years ish, so that can't be it. The Canadians, I don't know. They have to have won more recently than that. I would think. I'm missing teams, but I can't think of the rest of the teams. The Canucks have probably been terrible for a long time. Yeah, I'm just gonna guess the Canucks. Are Vancouver one of them?
Vancouver Canucks are one of them. Yes, they came into the NHL in 1971, 53 years ago, or 53 seasons counting 71. Never have won. So
never.
2 years short. Yeah, never. Never have won. So right behind the Maple Leafs for that. But there's one other team right there with them.
Same time frame. American team. Yeah, this is going to be tough. I guess I can ask about the divisions, but I don't know if it's going to help.
Cut it down to 8 teams.
Yeah, if I know what teams are in the divisions.
Fair.
That's the problem, is I don't know if I'm going to know what teams are in the. Yeah, so what well, that might help with some regionality. Yeah, let's try that. Yeah. What division are they in?
Well, unfortunately, it's the Eastern Conference, so the regionality is basically
the entire East Coast.
Because they just named the divisions 2 things and put teams in them. The Atlantic Division is the home of this team.
Yeah, that doesn't help. That's not regional, but the East cuts it in half. Well, not really, kind of in half. Not regionally, but at least if I knew the divisions, it would cut it in half. I don't know. See, and if I get you to name like famous players, we're gonna go through this whole thing again.
We're right back
where I'm just not gonna know.
Predicament. I've got one loaded and ready, but I'm not sure.
Oh, you do? Oh, see, and I wouldn't know the answer. If I asked for what state they play in, would that give it away? Would it be obvious if you told me the state? Like, they're not named after the state?
They are not named after the state. If you knew the divisions, it would give it away. But in this case, you don't, so it would not.
So what state is the team in?
They are in the state of New York.
State of New York. Okay, so Rangers, Islanders are obvious. Buffalo. I can't think of many more cities. Syracuse doesn't have a team. There's Albany. They don't have a team. Is it the Sabres?
I was about to say, I'll save you some consternation. The other team you were looking for is the Devils, and they technically are in New Jersey. Not even.
Oh, that doesn't count.
So they're not. Yeah, the fourth team you're thinking of in that area isn't
New Jersey.
Actually. So you named all 3, and so you're guessing Sabres?
That was all 3. Okay, so then it's got to be the Sabres, right?
It's got to be the Sabres. Yes. I was going to give you. All right, I was going to give you Dominic Hasek. Was that going to do anything for you?
I've heard the name, but I wouldn't have known who he played for.
Gotcha.
Nope.
And they are, the Atlantic Division of the NHL is the jacked up one, because it's the Canadian teams on the East, so Ottawa and Montreal and whatever, but Florida's also in that division, and so
yeah.
So it's
I like it. Can I just say, as not a hockey fanatic, but someone who does watch hockey some, the way that they align the divisions for COVID, so that all the teams like regionally played like close to each other. I kind of appreciated that, even though like you never played a Canadian team because you couldn't cross the border. But beside that, they could figure that out. But there's got to be some other way to like crunch them all together, you know?
Yeah, I appreciated Carolina being able to play the old Southeast Division teams, but also like Nashville. I feel like Columbus was in that division, Dallas. Like, it was just a good Southern hockey division. But
I think the Northeast Division, the farthest south you went was DC, and the farthest north you went was Boston. It was like a day bus ride anywhere you went. You didn't have to fly. Well, they did probably, but everything was really close.
And it was.
But then the West Coast was like, the West Coast was probably like from California to Illinois or something stupid. But anyway.
And they also were all sponsored, which I think was a brilliant idea, and I don't know why they stopped that. It's a great idea because the divisions are all made up anyway. Like, so just put a brand name on it too and see what happens.
Why not?
All right, we got through trivia. Much better. Okay, bonus points if you know the team with the longest drought in professional sports, period.
Oh, that's going to take a while.
So football team.
One name just came to mind, but I don't think it's it.
Who do you think it is?
The Bears, but I don't think that can't be it.
It is the actual worst franchise in the NFL. The Arizona Cardinals.
See, yeah, we did talk about them, and I was on the East Coast because I was thinking old, so I was thinking they had to be East Coast, but yeah, they moved. That doesn't count either.
Yeah, several times. They've got the distinction as the oldest, so and I think it's like 20 years they've got on Toronto, so a big gap there. Yeah. All right, so back to our Bill Barilko story. So we know that the two, Barilko and Hudson, went missing after a fly fishing trip to northern Ontario. In the years following their 1951 Stanley Cup win that immediately preceded the disappearance, the Maple Leafs don't go so good. Their seasons don't go so good either. After winning 4 cups in 5 years, the Leafs would go 11 years without winning another championship. In 1952, they were swept in the semis by the Red Wings. In 1953, they didn't even make the playoffs, which is an achievement in its own right. There's still 6 teams in the NHL at this point, so to not make the playoffs means you were one of the worst 2. Right? Like, it's not like today. You had to be bad to miss the playoffs. In 1954, 1955, and 1956, they lost to the Red Wings in the semifinals 3 consecutive years. In 57 and 58, they missed the playoffs again. They did make the finals in 1959 and 1960, but they lost to their rival, the Montreal Canadiens, who had just taken Frank Selke, whose name goes on to the trophy for the best center in the NHL each year. They took him from the Toronto Maple Leafs junior hockey system to become their coach for the Canadiens, which is part of, back in 1946, which is part of the reason why the Maple Leafs struggled in the first place, right? This kind of development system that Selke had set up fell apart after he was gone. The Maple Leafs lost it. The Canadiens benefited from it. And so that's really the reason for the struggles, the root of the problem if we were to search for it. But eventually, everything comes all together in 1962. They would eventually defeat the Chicago Blackhawks 4-2 in that year's Stanley Cup Finals to win a cup for the first time in 11 years. Barilko, to his credit, had been kind of enshrined in popular culture by this time. His number retired from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And for the fans, it felt like a little bit of a curse had been lifted. They lost this guy in this tragic accident, and then nothing seemed to go right for them since. But everything kind of fell into place. And Barilko's story is one of complete coincidence, happenstance, whatever you want to call it, a curse or whatever. Things just seem to happen in weird ways, from the premonition his mother had all the way to this fact. Just weeks after the Maple Leafs hoisted their first cup in 11 years, on June 6, 1962, a helicopter was flying over Cochrane, Ontario, and spotted a glint of metal among a group of trees. And researchers came to the area and found a Fairchild 24 airplane. It's the same kind of airplane that Barilko and Hudson were flying in 11 years prior. When they explored the plane itself, they found, quote, that the wings were torn clean off, the cabin was badly burned, and still strapped into the seats, they found 2 skeletons. They also found, that's the end of that quote, they also found fish skeletons preserved in the back of the plane in a cooler where they had gone fishing, and they were able to positively identify that this was Bill Barilko and Henry Hudson. They had finally found him at last, just weeks after the Maple Leafs finally won the cup again. So they win. He goes missing 11 years. Nobody finds him, no trace. And then they win again. And then suddenly the evidence is found. Certainly high level of coincidence in that stuff there. I don't know. It's just weird.
It is very odd timing because, yeah, two months after he won his fourth cup and made that goal, he disappears. It is not until they won another cup, the team finally figured out how to win another cup without him. And 2 months after the 62 cup was won, this helicopter pilot spotted the wreckage in a dense swampy forest. But it is a little odd. I can totally see why this is now being seen as like a curse. I mean, it could have been a curse before they found him. It was like, oh, well, we were doing so well, and then this tragedy happened. It fell over the tragedy fell over the team, and then they won, and they were like, oh, well, we won, but like our guy that disappeared 11 years ago is still not here, so that's weird. But then 2 months later, he was found, which is very odd. I did a little bit of looking into some of the stuff, and there is a really weird story. There's this really weird story that someone from Timmins told one day. Apparently, they had some sort of history thing in a local library, and his name was Kevin Vincent. He was involved in the search party, and he stated that on the way they found the plane, and on the way to storing the wreckage of the plane, a search party member suggested that when they got back to the place where the plane took off, which was Porcupine Lake in Timmins or near Timmins, they should dip part of the plane in the lake. It's like, oh, well, like you arrived, you came back home, you made it. But that wasn't possible for whatever reason. So in the heat of the moment, they found 2 Tim Hortons cups. Here's the tie. They found 2 Tim Hortons coffee cups, dipped those into the lake, and then poured that water from the cups onto the plane. Like, we couldn't dip it in the water, so we'll pour water on it. About half hour after that kind of ceremonious act took place, one of the expedition crew members came over and told everybody that the Leafs player, Tim Horton, replaced Barilko in the Leafs defensive line the summer after Barilko passed. Is that not the creepiest happenstance if that actually happened? Is that not the weirdest thing?
Just another coincidence, right? Like just another weird tie-in to the situation, right? None of these things would be weird on their own, and they're not really weird altogether. It's just, but it's eerie. It's coincidental in a way where it shouldn't, and I understand coincidences aren't causes or anything like that. I get it. But yeah. Also, who knew Tim Horton was a hockey player? That's the same Tim
same
Horton
guy,
that gives
apparently.
his name. Yeah, founded the restaurant, was a member of the Maple Leafs on the teams that eventually would. I think he was still on the team when they started their second run after this discovery. But yeah, no, just a coincidence. The only things laying around are Tim Horton cups. Tim Horton's the guy that replaced him on the defense. Oh,
wow.
Man. It takes a lot of
kind of creepy, yeah.
A lot of things. Yeah, it's just that the mom's premonition, which moms always have premonitions, and most of the time you'll be okay, but in this case, not so much. And I didn't see anywhere that listed a reason for the crash, and I guess after 11 years, you wouldn't be able to find like extensive evidence, but like had to be something catastrophic because they think that they were like dead on impact, I guess, from where they were still strapped into the seats. So I don't know what happened, but not great.
I don't know. I did see that they caught a ton of fish while they were out, and so because it was a small plane, that maybe an extra 100 pounds or 150, 200 pounds or something gave the plane a weird feel or something. But yeah, it was burned, so it means it caught on fire, gas tank exploded, that sort of thing. So yeah, they probably didn't last long after all that. So
yeah, and I'm glad that safety and in this realm has gone up. I know that it's still recently that we lost Kobe Bryant to a helicopter crash, but back in this era, Barilko died in a plane crash. It was a little bit later, a couple of decades later, but like Thurman Munson died in a plane crash, player for the Yankees. Roberto Clemente died in a plane crash. The Marshall football team plane crash. During this era, 40s, 50s, I think there's a story that the Lakers, still in Minneapolis, put down a plane in a field, because they almost had a plane crash. I think this is also one of my other irrational fears, is the fear of flying. And I think it comes from all these things, seeing athletes, in that way. And then I think when I was a kid, the Colorado Buffalo, like men's and women's basketball team, had a plane struck by lightning and had to do a emergency landing or something. It's just a lot of those things. And I never realized, I saw an article about it, researching this story. Like, leagues have contingencies for what happens if a team plane goes down, like how they would move forward and what they would do, and dispersal drafts and things like that. Like full-fledged plans in collective bargaining agreements for how this would go down. And it's just not great to think about, but it's one of those things that just reminds you of how fragile all this is. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it is an unfortunate reality. It is something that you have to plan for because it's happened so many times. They probably didn't have a plan before it happened the first time. And then once it happened, they were like, oh man, this is real. This is possible. And so, I mean, they had to do something. Yeah, there's plenty of these sorts of tragedies and stuff, but the timing of this one in particular, with winning, going lost, and then winning again, and then being found so quickly, one after the other, was just very odd. I did look up a stat while you were talking at some point. 17 out of the 116 Stanley Cups were won in overtime.
17. He's one of the 17
yep.
with a...
One of the 17, yep. So like 15% of all goal. Stanley Cups. Yep, yeah. 15% of all Stanley Cups-ish were won by a goal in overtime.
Yeah, and there's a push for Barilko to be, because of the moment, because we didn't mention it, but in the early 90s, a Canadian rock band made a song that kind of catalogs the situation, and it became super popular in Canada. His number is retired by the Maple Leafs, and so there's a push to put Barilko into the Hall of Fame. And there's a couple of reporters that wrote a story about it, and one of them is like, I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame, but that being said, I would be the most excited person for him to go into the Hall of Fame, right? Like, it's one of those situations where a bunch of people want it to happen just because of the notoriety and the feeling and the thought that people have for Barilko. So maybe that's a thing that'll happen in the future, but we don't know. But yeah, nobody else has a 80% Stanley Cup winning percentage in their seasons played. Small sample size, but still, yeah, 80%.
But
can't beat 80%.
That's tough, right?
4 titles. But yeah, yep. Just tragic story, weird story, coincidences. The only way it would be any weirder is if they had found the wreckage and then they won the cup. That would be
lifting the curse kind of thing.
Now, if they put him in the Hall of Fame and they win that same season, like after the vote's taken, then we know that there's some
come back here to listen to that episode, because we will talk about it.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, but any last thoughts?
No, just a cool story. If he does go into the Hall of Fame, that's cool. I mean, glad it kind of came full circle with him being found, because in rural Ontario, Canada, northern Canada is probably very desolate and stuff. So I mean, I figured that there was a good chance that he wasn't ever found, like he just disappeared and no one ever found him. But especially after that initial search, but glad somebody located him, and it's kind of like a full circle closure kind of moment. You always wonder, especially with the conspiracy theories, when someone goes missing, you kind of know, but you do hold out hope. And so at least that kind of closed the circle, turned away some of the speculation and conspiracies and stuff. So, but great career overall. And we will have to take a trip to at least as far north as the southernmost Tim Hortons and figure out what it's all about, because I have no idea.
Got to try it. All right. Well, if you've got a story you want us to cover, this was a listener submission. So if you've got one you want us to cover, send it to us. We'll be glad to research it and get it out there for you. But until next time, that's what you don't know about Bill Barilko. We'll see you later.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.